Yeah, I got it.
Don't screw it up.
Don't worry.
This meeting of the Attleboro School Committee is called to order. Please rise and join the committee in the salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, and please note that the meeting is being electronically recorded. We begin tonight with a series of special announcements, and to start off our special announcements is the head of our drama program at Attleboro High School, Mr. Tarsi. Mr. Tarsi, if you could join us, the committee. Mr. Tarsi is the first guest to step to the new half podium in room 178. So we haven't figured out if the microphone works with it, but it's a pleasure to have you here. And for those of us who have had the opportunity to see the performances that take place at Attleboro High School in the Bray Auditorium, we know that we are lucky to have you and our theater program, and we know that there's a special event coming up in just a few days, and so if you could share that with the committee and the community, we would appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chairman Murphy. I happen to be in the area, and Mr. Murphy asked me to discuss the event coming this Saturday. This Saturday, the Attleboro High School Drama Club is acting as one of 14 host sites for the preliminary round of the Massachusetts High School Drama Festival. This is an annual event where over 100 schools throughout the entire state participate, and they are assigned to one of the 14 host sites. We have been hosting the first round pretty much every year since 2003. We love hosting, and all our guests have praised our students as being kind and gracious hosts. And many schools that are coming this year, a couple of them have been here before and are thrilled to be assigned back at Attleboro because of wonderful times they've had here in the past. The event is a tri-level tournament, so at the end of the evening on Saturday, three judges will select 3 of the schools to advance to the semifinal round 2 weeks later, and then on to finals 2 weeks after that. We've been very successful in the past. We've advanced to semifinals in both of the past 2 years, and 5 out of the last 8, and making 1 appearance all the way at finals back in 2003. Our kids are doing a wonderful job this year with the show we selected called Snow Angel, about a bunch of high school students in Vermont and interesting, perhaps supernatural events that happened to them in the snow days following the biggest blizzard to hit their area in 100 years. The show was chosen last spring. And I have already told the entire drama guild that Attleboro takes full responsibility for the weather. The kids are doing wonderful, though. Our show performs on Saturday at 12:15. That's 4th in the day, but a $10 ticket allows you to see any or all of the 7 plays, and that includes performances by Mansfield High School, Foxborough High School, Franklin High School, East Boston High School, Cambridge, Ringe and Latin School, and Hudson High School throughout the day. And it's great. Over the years, many different schools have been here, so I think it's great for our kids to see many kids. And we actually performed with some of them over the past couple of years, so they keep in touch via Facebook and whatever. So it's a wonderful experience for our kids, and I'm grateful that the school and district has allowed me to host it since 2003.
That's great. Well, thank you very much, and thank you for your leadership. Just out of curiosity, how many students are in the cast?
It's a cast of 16.
16.
And then
Across
there's
grade levels or any?
All grade levels.
Sure.
And there's also a tech crew and stage crew of probably about another dozen or so. And each of the visiting schools is provided a couple Attleboro kids to be with them the whole day to answer hosts, we call them.
Hosts,
They are
okay.
ambassadors of goodwill.
Okay.
So we have another dozen or so kids doing that, and alumni come back to help work the concession stand. It's a favorite event of the kids over the years.
Great, that's great. And so 12:15, their curtain goes up on the Attleboro performance.
Yes.
And what time does the day start?
The first show starts at 9 a.m.
9 a.m.
and they pretty much run about every hour.
Okay.
And the final show starts at 4:30, and we hope the award ceremony will start about 8 p.m.
8 p.m.
But we're at the mercy of the judges there.
Aren't we all? All right. Well, that's great. And again, congratulations to you and your students for all. When did the production on this performance begin?
We had auditions right before holiday break back in December.
Okay. Well, that's great. And again, for those of us who have seen the performance in the past, it's always something that we look forward to. And, regardless of what happens with the competition, I'm sure it will have been a tremendous and fulfilling experience for students. But we'll keep our fingers crossed.
Well, thank you.
Okay, good luck.
And I will report back if we have
Please do.
good news.
Yes, please do. Please
Thank you.
do.
Now I have to go work on some sets.
All right, good luck. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming by.
Thank you.
Okay, our next announcement came in just prior to our meeting beginning. The Attleboro cheerleading team has won the Hockomock League Championship, and so yeah, how about a round of applause for the cheerleading team? Any comments? Anyone like to add any comments?
They were amazing. They had a very high score compared to the other teams, so they really
There you go.
did
That's
well.
when you win.
That's a good way to put it.
A high score compared to the other team. That's all we're really looking for in sports and in life. All right, final announcement. The kindergarten open house across the district is taking place on Wednesday evening. So if you have a kindergarten or a prospective kindergarten student in your house, if you have a student that you'd like out of the house next year and is of age, we certainly welcome your family at any of our elementary schools. I believe the start time for kindergarten open house is, anyone know? 6:30 p.m. At each building? There we go, at each building, 6:30 p.m. Kindergarten open house. And we'll be having further information over the coming weeks about the registration process and trying to get the word out into the community in the hope that we can concentrate our registrations as early in the cycle as possible in the hope of avoiding some of the difficulties coming. And some of the difficulties are unavoidable. We know that registrations take place all the way through the summer, but certainly the more registrations we have in the spring, the better it is for everyone. Okay, we'll move on to our open forum portion of the program, which time I am obligated to tell you that this is a time when members of the public may address the school committee. Open forum is not a time for committee members to engage in dialogue with members of the public. Guidelines for open forum are available to you. Please know that we're interested in what you have to say, but we cannot respond without background information on your issue. Would anyone like to address the school committee during open forum? This is your moment. Thank you. Okay, and so you know what? This is a problem when you don't look through the agenda beforehand. I assigned the task of moving the podium, the now portable podium, to the guy who's next on the agenda. So we'll see how agile Mr. Stowe is as he prepares for his Around Attleboro event. Thank you very much. Excellent, by the way. Nice job. So, Mr. Stowe, Around Attleboro, what do we have?
So March 5th here at AHS, we have the junior parent night at 6:30. And it's a time when juniors and their parents are introduced to like college planning concepts that they're going to need in the coming months. Because college planning is obviously a hard process. And I know some seniors that are still struggling with it. So good thing to go to.
And
Looking forward.
This will be a night concentrated for juniors and their
Yes,
parents. correct?
juniors and their parents,
Will you be in attendance?
of course.
Good. Very nice. Nice. And you'll report back and let us know how you made out.
All right.
Okay, good. All right, thank you, Mr. Stowe. And we'll move on to our first business agenda item, which is an update on the Envisioning 2020 Strategic Planning Initiative. As we've discussed several times at this in this forum, the Strategic Planning Initiative broken up into 3 standing ad hoc committees, being co-chaired by the Vice Chair of the School Committee, Mrs. Scales, and the Assistant Superintendent, Mr. Sawyer. I know each of you have spent many evenings over the course of the past several months in this room and when we've kicked you out in other rooms, working to put together the proposals for the district's long-term objectives. I know there has been some significant and substantive progress just in recent weeks, and so Mrs. Scales and then to Mr. Sawyer, if you have anything you'd like to share with the committee, and we'll certainly be having a more detailed discussion in the very near future, but I did want to just give the opportunity for a quick update.
Sure. Our mission vision group is going to be meeting Wednesday, and we're going to start discussing the feedback we received from the community regarding the mission and the vision statements that we came up with and the essential beliefs. We just want to thank everybody for their feedback and their comments that were made. Also, the strategic planning group, we will be booking a meeting soon, and we've been snowed out several times. But they have defined 4 pillars, and right now I cannot for the life of me. I know culture,
Learning,
engagement,
and infrastructure.
there we go. And then the public engagement group is still working on mapping the community, and we have a meeting this Thursday.
And again, we'll be going to greater detail in the coming weeks and having some opportunities for more formal presentations as the recommendations begin to come into the committee. But Mr. Sawyer, anything you'd like to add?
We'll be ready to present a draft vision statement to the committee very soon.
Okay, good. And again, because I know sometimes there can be confusion about the sort of sequence of events, the mission statement and the district's essential beliefs, the mission statement being based on those essential beliefs, were presented to the school committee in December. The school committee then directed the ad hoc committee and then to engage in the solicitation of public comments. We've done that through multiple public forums where we had several community members who came and offered their comments, sometimes dropping off written statements, sometimes coming and just engaging in a discussion. For those of you who had the opportunity to attend, I think they were good discussions. I think they're necessary discussions. And then through that and through the electronic means by which people have submitted comments, we've collected all of the information and provided that to the Mission Vision subgroup, which will now be charged with bringing forth a formal recommendation on essential beliefs and on the district's mission statement. The next step, which Mr. Sawyer just referred to, is for the district to adopt a vision statement. We will, when this comes up again, be talking about the distinction between the mission statement and the vision statement. The vision statement, again, as Mr. Sawyer said, will be presented in the coming weeks. I'm not asking anyone to recite it off the top of their head, but would either of you like to share sort of the concepts that are attempting to be incorporated into the vision statement? A teaser, if you will.
Sure. We've put community really at the center of the vision statement. There's a strong feeling that the connection between the schools and the community needs to be the driving force behind the vision of the district.
Thank you. Again, so that's a little something to whet your appetite for those of you holding out for a mission vision discussion, and we'll get back to that in the coming weeks. And as we transition to the rest of our business agenda, I did just want to provide this as a segue. I know when we talk about mission, vision, long-term objectives, essential beliefs, all of that other sort of abstract, flowery type stuff that at times may not seem directly connected to the issues that we're going to face in the next 24 hours. I know that there can be an inclination on all of our part to sort of want to move on to the next big thing. If you look at the next 3 items on our agenda, next year's academic calendar, the update on the special education programming and some of the shuffling that's taking place in that department over the last year, and the potential revisions to the fee-for-service program, all 3 of those sound like they're going to have a more concrete impact on what we do here in the school system and the students that will file into classrooms tomorrow. I can fully appreciate that. I can fully understand that. I do think that the reason that this committee adopted both our basic agreement when we first took office and approved the strategic planning process is because we have to recognize that there is not another room somewhere in the district where the people elected by the community are focused on these types of long-term and very consequential agenda items. The district needs to set for itself long-term and ambitious objectives, and even when it can seem like the more sensational issues that we're dealing with, the plethora of snow days, when are we going to have vacation, who's going to pay what for the bus, I get it, okay? We've got to get through those. That's part of our job. It's part of our responsibility, but we can't lose sight of our responsibility to do the type of long-term planning that this project is about. So again, as I have before, on behalf of the committee, I want to thank Mr. Sawyer and Mrs. Scales and all of the volunteers, the parents, the teachers, everybody else who stepped forward and are helping us to do that work. And I look forward to having discussions this spring at the school committee level for the recommendations that will be brought forth, because I think it's important stuff. And as I said, there isn't someone else doing it, so I'm glad that you are. All right, so having said that, we'll move on to our more immediate pressing issues that keep our viewers tuning in. Our 2015-2016 academic calendar. The committee was briefed in the fall about the Leadership Advisory Board initiative that the administration and our educators have been putting into place as a successor to the Human Resources Pilot Project. And again, just like when we briefed the committee on that in the fall, when we talk about Leadership Advisory Board, when we talk about successors, the Human Resources Pilot Project, can sound like we're talking about inside baseball, and I get that. This is an initiative that Mr. Sawyer can maybe give us a little bit of background on, because I think that's important that we know where this calendar is coming from before we get into the actual discussion as to the next stage of that. So, Mr. Sawyer?
The Leadership Advisory Board is the formal mechanism that we are trying to create between the district administration and the union to jointly collaborate in the decision-making process, to have shared ownership of our internal decisions so that we can make better decisions and decisions that we can both feel good about and be collaborative rather than letting other things get in the way of what we think is best for kids.
Thank you. And so it's extremely important. This is about the empowerment of our educators. It's about raising our professional culture, and it's about understanding that if you want to be a school system that's going to make real progress, you need to have buy-in from all the different stakeholders, and you need to have that type of shared governance that Mr. Sawyer is talking about. There is not going to be a superintendent, a school committee, or one influential teacher who's going to be able to take a district of this size and move it, significantly forward. If we want to if we want the progress that we talk about sometimes, we've got to have these types of relationships. So, with that, this isn't, I think, in a lot of ways, sort of the Leadership Advisory Board's first sort of official deliverable that's coming out of the group. It's a task that in the past would just be the administration would formulate a proposal, send it over to the school committee, we check with the unions, and then off we go. We have a calendar. It's a very different process that, frankly, I think has produced a very different result, and I think that's good for the district. So with that, we can get to the meat of the.
Sure. I believe we have some lab members with us this evening. If I could invite them to join us up at the table.
I would just say I think we had additional lab members who would have been present had we had this discussion any of the times we were trying to have this discussion.
It's some of the other ones we
So
would have
once
had.
you reschedule for a third time, you tend to lose some of
Had
your-
a better turnout. It's too bad that our AA partners couldn't be here this evening, but part of the benefit of this is I think we can speak on everyone on the lab's behalf,
Sure.
and we certainly will have them in for whatever comes next. In case anyone doesn't know, we've got your high school principal, Bill Rooney, and principal of Hyman Fine Elementary School, Tricia Martin.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Okay, so the first thing I want to point out about our calendar is that this is a second revision to the proposal by the lab. We created a calendar that was a compromise, one that we felt comfortable with, and then we had the worst, snowfall in anyone's recent memory, and I think it changed our perception of the issue. And certainly, there was quite a lot of commentary from the community that I think changed the context of this calendar discussion. And so we went back to the drawing board to see if we couldn't do a little better. And I believe this calendar does that. I think we've delivered a calendar that is sensitive to many of the issues that have been raised by.
If you're at home looking for a silver lining to having only had students in school for 4 days in February, this would be one.
Yes, an improved calendar.
There you go.
Let's start with the end. I think all of us are in agreement that getting out late in June is not not the best way to have the school year ended. We'd like to have a earlier conclusion to the school year. So that is the goal of the calendar, is to bring in an end date that is at a good time. I want to be clear that when looking at what is that date that should be the target, there are limitations to what we can do. The high school has MCAS testing that it's required to administer in June. We also have to have graduation for seniors, and we have to have time for the high school to grapple with all of that. So for that reason, I think the window that we should be looking at as a district for bringing in an end date for any given school year is somewhere between June 12th and June 15th. Because of the way the calendar falls in a given year, there are different ways. It's not going. I don't think any one day is the right day. But I think if we can come in with an end date in that window, that will give us lots of time on the back end if there are snow days. get us out at a reasonable time if we don't, but also give the high school the time it needs to do its business. And so I'm excited that we have delivered a calendar that brings it a June 14th conclusion.
And I would just add that I think this is a very important point because everyone knows there's been a lot of discussion about calendars and vacations and the enormous inconvenience to everyone, starting with students, that the number of cancellations that we've been forced to have imposed on us. But when we're talking about long-term planning and when we're talking about these types of decision-making, we've got to take a step back and say exactly what it is that we're trying to accomplish. It's not just a matter of this has been really uncomfortable, I haven't liked this. We've got to have some type of knee-jerk reaction to make sure that I don't have to experience this pain anymore. Our objective, as Mr. Sawyer has just articulated, is to make sure that students do not stay in school longer than they need to in June. That's a goal that I think I've not heard anyone speak in opposition to as of yet. Okay, if we leave the door open long enough, I'm sure someone will come in and oppose it. But generally speaking, we want students out as early as possible in June. But as early as possible is different than, June 1st, and that we have some things that need to take place in the month of June, and so we look at it as having a window. Could someone say the window should be the 10th to the 12th? Probably. But I think the point is that this is a reasonable window. It's a reasonable objective with an educational rationale, and that's, I think, the appropriate point to start the conversation.
So how do we get there? The first thing I'd point out is that we have a pre-Labor Day start. September 1st would be the first day of school for children, and that's how we gain several days. On top of that, we have 2 August PD days for teachers. This is not something that is usually done, although it's not without precedent. And this would contribute to our end time. We have the third PD day. The district always has 3 PD days, and as I said, we're putting 2 of them in August. The third one we're putting just before Columbus Day weekend. We did that this year for the first time. I think that was a largely popular move, and Mr. Rooney advocated very strongly for keeping that. I don't know if you'd like to speak to the high school perspective on this.
Yeah, I mean, as Tyler mentioned before, the college application process is very strenuous. Being the parent of a senior, I am glad that at least all the acceptances are in the rearview mirror for my daughter. Now we have to make the decision as to where she's going to go. But that October 4-day window for students on the Columbus Day weekend does give many of our students an opportunity to go and make visits while schools are in session. We do advocate or we recommend to our upcoming seniors to make as many visits during the summer as they possibly can, but you don't get the realistic perspective sometimes when the college students are not in session. So that's why I advocated for that.
Definitely true. Tyler, keep that in mind.
We've put in half days on December 23rd and March 25th. Those would allow for travel days for families that travel on these holidays. And those are, so that picks up 2 days in the calendar that again helps us to deliver on that final day of the 14th. There are a couple issues that would need to be worked out with this calendar. We have not put in any of the early release PD days. The district usually has 6 of those. We would place those after we determine the frame of the calendar, which is being proposed here. And then inherent in this calendar are 2 other issues. One, the pre-September start is something we'd have to work through with the AEA. That's, again, it's not the case that that's never been done before, but they do have a provision in their contract that says school does not begin before September 1st, so we would have to work that out with them. And then we've included Good Friday as a half day on this calendar, and it is a matter of school committee policy that Good Friday is a holiday, so that's something that the committee would have to take up as well.
Okay. Any other points that anyone would like to add?
Just as far as the process in general and the lab, you know, I really commend everyone who was in support of this movement. I know Mr. Larson was a big part of the HRPP. And again, you know, being able to work with Mr. Sheehan and Mr. Sawyer to build consensus. It's not a situation where we raise our hands in these meetings and we vote. The meetings get a little lengthy. Sometimes they get a little heated. But you know, you have elementary, middle, and high school perspective. You have instructors. You have administrators. It really is. It is a very worthwhile team to be a part of.
That's good. It's important. Thank you. Any other comments, Tyler?
I had a question. Why is it that school usually starts after Labor Day?
In some years, it's just the way the calendar falls, and in others, it's because in Attleboro that's been past practice.
Depends how long you want to go back. I mean, students used to be working on the farm in the summer is, I think, the real reason. And as someone who offered comments in the strategic planning process when we were really looking for, does the mission statement capture the essence of what we're trying to do, the agrarian calendar continues to be a challenge. We get a lot of different comments when we on the draft mission statement, and it's something that I think districts in the 21st century should always look at, and that's goes with state education systems should look at. But for the moment, you have the summer off and you start school in the fall, and I think that sometimes people grow attached to certain traditions even when they may not have a direct relation to the student's educational trajectory. But
Okay,
so thank you for your question, Mr. Stowe. Mr. Sheehan.
There's another point that was discussed with the lab, and that is that the students and teachers will, after their summer break, actually start with 2 4-day weeks.
Mhm.
So it's a nice transition
Sure.
coming back instead of going 5 weeks in a row,
Yeah.
5 days in a row. So it's 2 4-day weeks is a good way to start for
Sure. Thank
teachers
you.
and kids.
Mr. Storrs.
I know by state law, we have to create a calendar that has the 180-day and then 5 snow days built in, but I think I see 7.
Are you talking about the yellow days at the end?
Yes.
So the yellow days represent vacation days, and they could be in other places. And in fact, in other calendars, those yellow days would be someplace else in the calendar before the end. By capturing them at the end, it's just a way of accounting for them, so that we don't lose. It's a way of counting the days as we build the calendar. Those yellow days could be anywhere. They're at the end not because they're the 5 snow days. The 5 snow days actually are accounted for in this calendar by the purple days after the yellow days. So we can't plan to have 180 days in the last 5 days
Right.
because you need 185.
But your
So-
last statement actually got more confused because the 14th would be the 180 days.
Yep.
So the 21st would be the 185 days with the 5-day snow days included. You have it with purple going all the way to the 30th.
Yeah,
which-
we're just we're
through with that.
we're going we're going cross purposes. The yellow days are not capturing the snow days. The yellow days are literally vacation days that you could add vacation days anywhere you want them. It's different in different years. We've put day vacation, like this year we had January 2nd as a vacation day because of where the 2nd fell. We decided not to have school that day. So if we were to have that yellow day, would be moved up in the calendar to the 2nd, and that'd be one less yellow day at the end of the calendar. So the idea in building the calendar is to have as many yellow days at the end as possible, reducing the number of school days. So we're putting more vacation days in June rather than earlier in the year.
So I think just to get past this, couldn't we just say that ultimately the final calendar won't have the yellow days at the end because the 180th day
Yes.
will be,
Right.
this is
But as we
acceptable 14th.
revise over and over again, the yellow days help us to keep track of
All
it.
right, so they're for planning purposes now.
Yes.
But in the final calendar will not be.
Will not be there.
I'm good.
Right. Thankfully, because the scrring's not down, the community can't see the yellow days. But you should know that we're aiming to reduce your yellow days. If anyone wants to know the gist of the discussion, we're against yellow days. Ms. Singer.
I just have a question. I know you said the 6 half-day PD days aren't in here yet,
Yes.
but when the calendar does get finalized, are you planning on sticking to the Friday half-day PD days?
I haven't
or is that-
discussed it at all. Wanted to. I mean, there are some I don't know, radical is a little bit of a strong word, but there are some real changes in this calendar to what we've been doing for the last couple of years, and honestly, I wanted to finalize that before we tackled what to do with the PD days.
Mrs. Scales, then Mr. Withers.
I just want, earlier you was talking about the 2 professional days being in August and how, that'll help us at the end. But there was other reasons why, too, you were putting it there, correct? The professional days together before?
Yes, there are other
The
reasons.
more important reason.
Yeah.
Which, please share.
We want to try professional development before the year starts so that teachers can get training ahead of the beginning of the year rather than in the middle of it. This way we can, introduce ideas and they can get what they're going to need to do without having to wait a couple months to be told about it.
Mr. Withers.
When you talk about how this calendar has some real changes from what's been done in the past, is it really the starting before Labor Day? Is that really
Sorry for
major
Labor Day,
one?
the August days in particular.
The 2 professional development days in August?
Yep.
Because we've started before Labor Day before when it
Yep,
fell on
and
the
we've-
7th, right?
there's nothing in here that's never, well, I shouldn't say that. I don't know if we've ever done a half day on the 23rd before.
Okay.
That's a different thing as well. The August days, the starting before Labor Day, those are things that have been done, but they've never been done consistently. We're trying to build an approach to the calendar rather than just sort of letting every year be its own thing. So, and that starts with agreeing on an end goal. So if we can agree that, all right, we need to build calendars that come in between the 12th and the 15th, then that will guide our thinking about the decisions we have to make from where to start and what happens in between.
I would just back up one point. I think that the real starting point is the process by which the calendar is developed. Once you have that process, you build the consensus as to what the goal is. The goal is in June, and then we move from there. Mr. Storrs.
As far as the 2 full-day PDs in August, I know this was something discussed years ago. Love that idea. Glad to see it here. Do you foresee that being done through a memorandum of agreement?
Well, I would just say that there are contractual implications to this, and we're going to address those.
And I believe there's a
different forms.
second union that also has that requirement that would have to be addressed. The other one was this year, how many half-day PD, I know that didn't we cut it back this year? The number, the total number?
No, what we did, just as of the Friday before February vacation, I changed that from a half-day PD or release time day to a full day of school because we've missed so much time.
Right.
We're
so-
potentially looking to
So we
put
had
that
6,
somewhere else.
we had 6 built into this calendar?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Withers.
I see, with what you've done in moving the start time back and also the way the calendar falls next year, you're able to reach your goal without doing it. But was any discussion given to the spring vacations and combining them into one?
A considerable amount.
Lots.
Okay. 'Cause I know, there's been a lot of talk about that. I think, and as Chairman Murphy said, we wouldn't want to just do it in response to what happened, but a lot of the discussion has been that perhaps that would be a good move to make anyway.
Could you elaborate on this point, Mr. Storrs?
Sure. Honestly, from my perspective, I don't think there's a tremendous difference between the February and April and the March. So, there's no, and I think in our committee conversation, there was the same feeling that it's not really about one way or the other from our perspective. Mm-hmm. The real concern is that the state has been doing it one way, and most communities do it that way, and to go out of line with what other people are doing would cause a lot of difficulties for a lot of different people. So if you are a parent in this community, but you work in another school system, then your vacation will not be aligned with your children's. If you
Vice versa.
Vice versa is true. Parents who are straddling 2 communities, families that are straddling 2 communities, which in this community we have quite a few, they would be adversely affected. That really, this, DESE, the Department of Ed,
True to form.
true to form, they tell us you guys should go to, consider going to a March vacation, but then they don't take the leadership in leading the state towards that. They're recommending it, but it's really a hard thing to do unless, as an entire Commonwealth, we decide to do it together. Which, if people are up for that challenge, I don't think that would be a problem for any of us. I think we would get behind that readily.
No, there are some of us that, came up in the South, and there's one vacation, and it's predicated on Good Friday. And so you have Good Friday, and then you have the whole next week. And even though it's not the same week every single spring, at least you can look at when Good Friday falls and you can know that you can plan your trips in the spring around that. And there was some momentum for that, but I also think that some of the discussion that we had was based on the fact that, going back to some of the things that haven't been done in quite a while or haven't been done with much regularity, like having the 2 PD days in August starting well before Labor Day, were significant enough changes. We didn't want to necessarily
Yeah.
go haywire.
I mean, I think the issue here is that in setting a calendar, one, as Mr. Sawyer said, we're trying to pursue objectives and to develop an approach to a calendar that will hopefully make this easier in the way that it's not something the district struggles with on a year-to-year basis. And the other thing I think we have to keep in mind is that we are balancing many different interests with calendars. We are an employer of 800 individuals. We are the educator of 6,000 individuals. We have responsibilities to the municipality that, from an operational standpoint, that need to be taken into account. And for all those reasons and many others, there is not a right or wrong calendar. There's not a calendar there's definitely no such thing as a perfect calendar. And there's no calendar that's going to make everyone happy, which in my experience makes it easier because you can just give up on that one and decide that someone's going to be upset about this and we can move on to more important things. The one thing I would say, because I think this is also worth noting when we talk about the vacation scheduling, the generally speaking, the sort of the thought and approach that I know one community in this area took in recent years was to more or less combine the April and the February vacation. So rather than having the week off in February and the week off in April, you have the 1 week off in March. One of the issues with that, again, it doesn't mean that it's not worth consideration, and I'm glad to hear that it was thoroughly considered, is that we only have a net gain of 3 days when we combine those two because of the federal holiday in February and the state holiday in April. So in this instance, and I think this is an important point too, Mr. Sawyer, you mentioned that the original calendar that was set to come before the committee on January 26th is different than the one being brought before us tonight as a result of the issues we've dealt with in the last month. How many days were shaved off based on the changes that were made? I think it's 4.
I think it's 4. Looks like it was the 18th this year.
Yeah.
And 14th
So
now.
the point is that with the changes that you've instituted, concentrated primarily in September, 4 seems like we're pretty sure it's 4. Doing math on the spot is not this committee's specialty, I don't think. But the changes that you instituted between January 26th and tonight have shaved off more days than had we only addressed the vacation issue. The issue is if we were to address the vacation issue on top of what you've done, is we would start to encroach upon those days that Mr. Sawyer mentioned that the high school needs in order to properly conclude the school year, okay? In addition to that, again, this is a calendar that has been brought forth by a joint committee of educators and administrators, and whenever, you've got people with representing different positions, you're going to have compromise. We need to be mindful of trying to value that, and frankly, recognizing that the Leadership Advisory Board is going to take on bigger issues than the 2015-2016 academic calendar. I know at times it can seem like when we've had this many cancellations that this will be the biggest issue the Attleboro schools ever face. I promise you, it will not be. It won't even be the biggest issue we'll face in the coming months. So right now we have a proposed calendar that is before the school committee. As Mr. Sawyer mentioned, there are both contractual and policy issues that need to be addressed in the coming weeks before the committee can take a final vote on approving a calendar. But I think that this discussion, I hope, can help guide the administration and the Leadership Advisory Board as those next steps are taken in the coming weeks. And for those wondering when the calendar will be finalized, I would say I'm hopeful that will take place in the next month. A fair estimation, but certainly the beginning stages of planning are well underway, and I think we've been able to give the community a sense as to what they can potentially expect. Mr. Larson?
Just before we wrap this up, I'd like to personally thank everybody that's involved in the lab. I think I've said it before, it's a unique group of individuals through the district that are representing all the different levels and all the different stakeholders in the district. And to watch them work through this process over the course of 6 or 7 different meetings, always basing the decisions on the educational, needs of the students. It's just been fascinating to watch, and it's really, really impressive. And really want to thank everybody involved, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. Thank you, Mrs. Martin. Thank you, Mr. Rooney. And we will, again, we'll be revisiting this issue in the near future and take some final action so all the additional planning that needs to take place can happen. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Okay, our next agenda item is a revisit of some of the special education issues that we last addressed on January 12th, which incidentally was the last time this committee met on its regular schedule. We have met several times since, just to be clear. So Dr. McSweeney is joining us. We had said on January 12th that we would have a follow-up discussion. Very briefly, to say that this is an issue is sort of an understatement. Special education is not an issue. It's a pivotal dimension of the school system that has substantial educational implications for a large population of our students and of our families. So the initial issues within that discussion really came to the committee's attention last June when there was a series of decisions made with regard to where programs would be housed in the coming school year. There were some concerns raised as to whether or not those buildings were properly prepared for the relocation and redesign of the programs. We touched upon this issue in August as we began to open the school year. Dr. McSweeney came on board in the first week of October in her capacity as the Director of Special Education. We discussed the issue in November, and then it was on our agenda on January 12th, in which we talked about some of the changes that had been put in place in response to some of the shortcomings and concerns that were identified in the fall. And so we had said at that time that we would have a follow-up discussion. Our goal essentially is to get a sense as to whether or not there are ongoing issues and whether or not, and what sort of the plans are that are being put in place to make sure that we conclude the school year in a way that maybe is a little more in keeping with our expectations than how we began. So with that, Dr. McSweeney, if you want to provide the committee an introduction and sort of pick up the conversation where we left off on January 12th, and I suspect there'll be some questions as we go.
Sure. Thank you, Chairman Murphy, and thank you again for inviting me here this evening. What you did describe is that there were programs and that were moved from both the elementary school or the elementary level as well as the middle school. In the elementary level, there were the Insights primary and intermediate program that was moved, and it was moved from Willett to Thatcher. And I have, through my work, have found that there were some really solid reasons and thinking on behalf of the special ed department and also the staff as to why they thought it would be best to make the move. Some of that was the ability to be near the early learning center, that the children there would be moving up into these programs and they would have close proximity to the teachers and the staff and getting a better sense of the children's needs, as well as the opportunity to share staff and have the ability to collaborate. So there seemed to be some real solid reasons as to the change. However, what I did come to find out, and what you all are aware of, is that transition was not done as smoothly as we would have liked that to happen. There was a need when I came on board to look at that carefully. As you know, I've tried to work with staff and continue to work with the administration in looking at that and trying to iron out some of those particular concerns. What we have done is we've looked at the analysis and redistribution of related services, which were the speech and language, OT, PT, those support services that were not necessarily thought out as carefully as they should have been in the beginning. We have done a redistribution. There will be another analysis of that at the end of this month. and we'll look to see how we can align that a little bit better to meet the needs of the students.
Could
And
you
that
just
will-
hold on for 1 second?
Sure.
So, because I mean, it seems to me that that is one of the sort of specific core issues that have led to much of the concerns that have been raised, I think, frankly, amongst staff and families, that whether or not the services that were being made available at Willett, whether or not they fully followed the students across town to Thatcher. Is that I know that's sort of a layman's explanation as to one of the root problems, but is that a fair characterization?
That was, yes, that needed to
Okay.
be looked at more
And-
carefully, and it did not follow as they had anticipated or
Okay.
had hoped.
And
Yes.
what I'm hearing you say now is that there has been an analysis, there has been a redistribution of services, and that analysis will continue at least at the end of this month, and then if there's a need for further redistribution, that will occur?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I didn't mean to interrupt, but I
No,
think
that's
that.
okay. It's
So,
fine.
thank you.
And again, I think that that's important to do, because students' needs change. And also, we have students that are moving in and out of the district, so there's always that need to kind of look at that. And also, in consultation with the principal and the team members, in addition to administration, there have been some additional staffing needs that have been brought on board for the program.
Staffing needs identified or staffing needs?
Identified, and also that we're implementing.
Okay. And that's concentrated just at Thatcher?
Yes.
Okay.
Also, there are other additional resources, a data analysis program that we have also implemented to try to make things a little bit more efficient for the staff. They were doing some of the work themselves, and we have a program that has come in, particularly for the primary insights program, that allowed them to work with the data a little bit more quickly. So we're trying our best to look at the resources within the program as well.
Okay.
So it's not only staffing, but it's resources for them. Are there still needs? Yes. Well, it's the type of program that we will continue to have needs, I think. But I'm confident that we're addressing them and we're looking at them as carefully as we can, both internally and then looking to make recommendations if we need more resources.
Okay, and as you said, I mean, these are, the nature of these programs and of the challenges that you're facing is that the needs are always evolving and they're always going to be coming up. We're not going to get to a point where we can say, we've fixed special ed, now on to some other thing. That's not the nature of the business. But is it possible to give the committee a sense as to what the most urgent needs are at this juncture?
At this point, I think looking at those related services, it's
Okay.
important for us to
So
do
the
that
further
analysis.
analysis, potential redistribution?
Mhm.
Okay. Thank you.
And then, as were aware, middle school also underwent changes. There was a movement from what was the former ABLE program, which is now identified as the Student Support Classroom, was moved from Brennan Middle School to Coelho Middle School. And what had happened with that move was several students were impacted, and the transition was smooth. And a majority of the students ended up being in more of an inclusionary model than they had been in Brennan. However, what we found is there were a few students that did not respond well to that model. So there was a need to then develop and create another classroom, which is called the Student Success Classroom in Wamsutta. There again, resources were, staffing resources were just reorganized. And we were able to set up a classroom to help support these few students that needed a more self-contained therapeutic classroom. So that had been put in place since I came on board in October. We were able to do that with internal resources. And there we also had one additional staffing paraprofessional that was put on board. So we were able to respond, I thought, well to the needs of those students. We are pleased to say that the majority of the students who did move from Brennan to Quell have done quite well. So that's a very positive piece of this. So as far as any other programmatic changes that may be coming, we certainly are looking now to move our students that are leaving the elementary to go to the middle to the high school. We really have to look very carefully at those transitions and needs. We also have to be sensitive to the fact that we have students moving into the district who may come in with IEPs, and we have to address their needs. We are looking, as we spoke the last time in January, we're looking to have open houses at the programs. There have always been, my understanding, a transitional phase the parents have been invited to, but we want to try to formalize that a little bit more. We're realizing that there's a need to do that.
Sure.
So I'll be working on that.
Any sense on a timetable as to when?
Usually that happens later in the year. It's
Okay.
usually more May, June
Okay.
that happens. So I would anticipate that we'd be planning for that time unless there are reasons to
Sure.
do it sooner.
Yeah, and the only thing I would say is I think one of the concerns, one of the ways in which this issue sort of gained traction, and I'm glad that it did, were concerns from families about the timeliness of the communication as to when changes were being put into place. One of the things that we talked about last time was that these are programs that in some cases families had their students in buildings for several years, and not until in the middle of June were they told that their students would be moving to a different building, which again I get that the core of the issue is the redesign of the program, but the impact that families are incurring, really we have to look at the total picture, and that includes where their students will be during the day. I know there are some questions on that. Mr. Withers, then Mrs. Skills.
Yeah, I just had a brief question on the open houses. Would that be for all students receiving services, or is that for students that are going to be transitioning from one level, grade, elementary school to middle school to high school, or again, for all students that receive services?
But what has traditionally happened has been those that have been transitioned.
Okay.
We can certainly look to open it up to any parent with children in the special ed programs. That's, certainly something to look at.
Right.
I want to make something extremely clear. The administration should not hold open houses because the school committee said, maybe if you do an open house, we'll get fewer phone calls. And I know that that's not the motivation behind doing it, but we should identify the problem, okay? What exactly was not communicated, and what was the botched timetable on which it was communicated, and how could we communicate differently in order to better serve students and families. Then, if an open house, either for students transitioning or students in particular programs or students for any other reason, is helpful, let's do an open house. And let's time the open house to help those students. But I just want to be clear because I think it seems like an idea that has a lot of value. I think that there could be a lot of benefits to students and families, but only if the sort of genesis of the open houses is coming from the right place. We don't want you to open up the doors so you can call us and say, we did it, nobody came, guess it was a bad idea. That will not go over well. But I know that the motivation is right. I just want to make sure that we're aligning what we're trying to do with what we're actually trying to solve. Mr. Sheen?
You're right, Mr. Murphy. The motivation, in fact, was about appropriately transitioning students from a grade level to a new program at a different level.
Right.
From elementary school to middle school to high school.
Right.
We need to make, by doing an open house in a formalized way, because we had done transitions like this before, but we're not with everyone.
Right.
Asking all the parents and their children and so forth to go to a program, to be able to take a tour, know where that classroom is, being able to speak to that teacher in that evening or whatever, goes a long way for the comfort zone of these children and their parents. When we can resolve some issues with parents or alleviate some of the anxiety that parents have when their little babies in 4th grade are going to the big middle school, when we do that, that transcends itself to the child itself.
Sure.
So the parents are comfortable, the children become more comfortable. So it's not because of the idea came from the school committee, it's that we want to make this a practice that's formalized for everyone, for those benefits.
Right, and however we've done it before, if it's worked, keep doing it.
Yep.
If we could do better,
We'll
do
go
it
do better.
differently. That's, I think, what, Mrs. Scales?
Yeah, I'm gonna wait till she's done.
Oh, sure, okay. You're more polite than everyone
Oh,
else.
I get it.
I'm sorry, Dr. McSweeney.
And I'm at the, as I said, and as Mr. Sheehan had indicated, we want to do better. It's important that we're communicating with parents. We want children to feel comfortable as they're transitioning into new programs. We want to make sure that we do our very best. And there's the commitment. I feel that in Attleboro, I have, as principal and now in my role as director of special ed, have felt that the faculty have really committed themselves to these students, and they feel as though they want to improve their practices as well. So we're supportive of that, and we'll continue to do our best to communicate that.
Thank you. Mrs. Scales?
Okay, as far as the Insights program that is still at Willett, when the other programs were moved to Thatcher, the theory behind it was that they were going to move everything over to Thatcher. Is that still going to be implemented for next year, so that all the Insights are together, or are they just going to leave it the way it is?
If, at this point, that has not been decided. What I have, through my conversations with staff, have learned is that they really felt the inclusion model at Willett, they really had some good opportunities there. So I think that that's something to really consider very carefully. If things are working well, and if the space allows us to remain there, I think that that's something would have really compelling reasons not to just shift.
Okay.
But I will say, as I discovered with the Insights program at Thatcher, there were some real strong reasons why they felt it would be better.
Right, right. But again, just be mindful of that communication piece. If somewhere down the road in the next couple of months we decide, no, maybe not, but just make sure that those parents are made
Yes.
aware.
Is there a timetable for that decision with regard to Insights that are still at Willett? And if there isn't a timetable, I don't want anyone making one up on the fly, but do you have any sense as to when a decision might be made as to whether or not there'll be a relocation?
What I can say is that we're looking at projections for next year, and that would be something that usually would happen in most cases during the next few months. But right now,
Okay.
no.
Okay, the only thing I would.
To answer your question.
So we don't know whether or not it will happen, which is fair, and we don't know if it would, what the timetable would be, which is also fair. The only thing I would say is that whatever the timetable we used last year didn't work. So let's not replicate that. If it's the case that we've made a decision that it's in the educational interest of the students to move a program from Willett to Thatcher, but we look at the calendar and it's already June, then perhaps we should consider having that program start in the 16-17 school year, so as to not avoid the same type of mistake. Mr. Sheehan?
I will add that philosophically speaking, this administration doesn't believe in placing all of our special education programs and students at one elementary school or one middle school.
Sure.
We're looking to put the program so we have less people being transferred from one school district or like Willett over to Thatcher or whatever the case may be.
Sure.
So we're actually looking to build programs in our 3 middle schools, not just at Coelho. We added the one over at Warm Sutter.
Right.
We want to keep the kids in the schools as much as we possibly can with the capability of sharing resources.
Sure.
And I think that's what Linda has alluded to with our previous administrator, that there were some solid reasons why that was taking place, and some was economics and be able to use the resources more effectively. But personally, I'm not looking to move programs for the sense of moving programs.
Yep.
If they're successful where they are,
Right.
why would we do that?
I think that's one of the questions that sparked this whole conversation. So, Mrs. Gillis?
One more question. As far as trying to get some of the out-of-district students back that are supposed to go out, what is the planning in place to implement new programming? Is there anything and at what levels?
We certainly will be.
I have that question too, but both Dr. McSweeney and Mr. Sheehan, you just alluded to that in terms of the middle school development,
Right.
which is one of the follow-ups from January 12th, so thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
That's all right. We're doing a careful review of the network program right now and trying to look at developing a middle school component to that. But we're really looking at students and student needs as opposed to just programs. Is being very careful not to just say, okay, we need a program, but really looking at what our students' needs and then building something around their particular special ed needs and specialized instructions. So I caution that we should be very mindful of looking at our actual students and then looking at how to build what they need as opposed to just, okay, we want a middle school program and then we'll look around and see which students that might be able to fit into that. So there's analysis going on looking at our out-of-district students because we want to bring them back into Attleboro. We really feel committed to doing that, and then to try to create what's needed for them.
And within your analysis of the kids that are currently like moving from the elementary to the middle and from the middle to the high, do you see any needs right now for additional programming based on the students that are in-house already?
There may be a need. There may be a need for a few changes because, again, there may be a need with a similar insight program
Okay.
going
Okay.
to a middle school model. So that would be somewhere that we need to look at for next year. So that would be an area. There may be a need to look at putting more of our student support classrooms in each one of the middle schools. And the projection would be that we would have that sort of a model in every one of our schools. And as Mr. Sheehan said, you don't want to put too many special ed programs in one school. But so, to answer the question in a simple way, middle school seems to be an area that we really
Okay.
need to look at right now.
But at the same time, because this is 24/7 that we do this, and I'm cognizant of the time element here, but
It's 24/7, you got all night.
right, that's what we do. But I'd like Dr. McSweeney to just share with us, with you, the understanding of the 12-plus program and the direction of the 12-plus program, because there are times in which other programs may be better than ours, may be more cost-effective than ours as well. And so discussions are saying, okay, where do those 12-plus kids go? And what's at the next level for them? And so you want to share with them what our pieces are with that school?
What we looked at, and what I think has been looked at prior to me coming on board was what can we do for our students that could provide programming that can expand their education and also their career and post-secondary work. And so we looked at the Bridgewater, and we program. Bridgewater University has what is called an ICE program that is helping to bring students into the university setting and providing very functional educational opportunities for them to not only experience the university, but also to have the opportunity to work on some of their academics. So that was something that could be very cost-effective for us and something that we couldn't necessarily replicate in the district. So That's one.
Right, and that, we've touched upon that, the 12+ program and some of the potential developments in that. So I think maybe that might be something for further discussion, that might be good for the community to know that the direction we're going there. But Mr. Larson?
I just for the sake of the community, because I know you've shared the numbers with us, and I'm just, I know when I talk to different people in the community, they have no feel for the size and the scope of the special ed program here in Attleboro. And so I was just gonna have you, if you could share just a couple numbers with us. I know there's approximately 6,000 students in the district, and the last number I know you had given us is somewhere approximately 1,100 of them fall within the special ed umbrella. Is that still correct?
Yes, in October, we had 1,013, and February, we had 1,030.
Okay, so approximately 1 out of 6. Which, I mean, I know the first time I heard that number was amazing to me. And then the next step, of the just over 1,000 students, how many different programs are they involved in? I know it was well over 50 at one point, and I don't know if you have an approximate number.
Well, as far as self-contained and more of the structured program, there are 22 of them in the district.
Right, but then there's other.
But there
There are
are
others.
78 programs
Okay,
within the
well-
district right now that children with IEPs attend. They may be in an inclusion setting, they may be in a self-contained environment, they may be in a therapeutic environment, but there's 78 programs that have staffing and students in there with individual education.
And I think those are really
Staggering.
significant numbers for the community to understand what the realm of what people are trying to get their hands around and control, and that it's a moving target on a day-to-day basis. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
On that note, I know that Mrs. Scales had asked on January 12th whether or not there had been any efforts to update the program descriptions, and also sort of what efforts we're taking to make sure that those are published and readily available. Is that something that perhaps when we bring this issue up again, I suspect March 23rd, possibly the April meeting, but probably March 23rd, if we could have an update as to where we are in terms of making sure that our program descriptions are up to date, accurate, and being communicated in whatever forums are most effectively. I think that would just be something that could be useful to both convey the point that Mr. Larson has raised about the complexity and the scope of the special education program, but also so that way we can have a better sense of keeping track as to what these programs are, where they are, who they're servicing, and why they're vital to the educational interests of the community. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Again, Dr. McSweeney, thank you. Thank you for coming in, for sharing this again. This is a discussion that will continue. It's something that is vital to making sure that we're providing the education that the members of the community expect and the students need. And we'll follow up, and if there are developments in any of these issues, certainly when the issue is on the agenda, I think the administration should know what it is that the committee is interested in, why we're concerned, and what are the questions that we're looking. I don't think there are any sort of hidden ball tricks with this committee when we asked to discuss this issue. One item that we did not really get into tonight, we don't necessarily need to now, but I know the administration, since the fall, Dr. McCarthy's departure, has talked about the need for reorganizing the administration of the special education department itself. That is something that we'll be interested in hearing about at the next time this comes up. Again, I would plan for March 23rd, and to give us a sense as to what direction we're going, and what we can expect as to how those resources are going to be concentrated from a staffing standpoint. So we'll table this for the time being. And certainly, again, I hope we've been able to convey what our concerns are, and so I don't think there should be any surprises at this point. So thank you again. Okay, Mr. Furtado, would you want to join the committee for our last business agenda item? I know transportation is a topic that you like to get in the middle of whenever you can. We like to have you in the middle of it. Be careful sitting. The superintendent seems like you might need a cough drop. I don't want you to catch a cold.
Preventative.
There you go. Much appreciated. All right, so potential revisions to the fee-for-service program. Tomorrow evening, in this room at 6:45 p.m., Mr. Withers and potentially other committee members, but certainly our policy chair, Mr. Withers, will be presiding over a public hearing about the proposed revisions. The proposed revisions policy EEA, which is the policy that governs fee-for-service. This discussion started at the policy subcommittee level after the debacle in which we opened the school year in September with regard to transportation. For those who have forgotten what that was about or what it was like, first of all, I envy you. And to give just a quick reminder, essentially we had an issue where the bus routes were developed after a critical variable had been changed in the development of those bus routes. Previously, the bus routes would be developed with all of the stops that had been in the bus routes the previous year. A decision was made not at the direction of this school committee, to develop the bus routes without the students who were participating in the fee-for-service program. As a result, there were significant changes in where bus stops were located. It took a long time for those issues to be ironed out. I'm thankful to the members of the administration who participated in the remedying of that situation. But we were then faced with a situation which is always a problem when you're trying to identify exactly what went wrong. What was the root cause? Was it a personnel issue? Did we just have some bad luck? Did the vendor change computer programs? And there were lots of different theories. And as those discussions have unfolded, we've essentially said that there were a multitude of factors that played a role. We've addressed those factors in a variety of ways, and we are looking now to try to stamp out this issue in a way that will provide for maintaining the level of service that the community has come to expect, being mindful of our fiscal limitations, and ultimately providing efficient and safe transportation to school and back. And so there are a number of components to this, to the proposed changes, and I'm going to walk through them now because we're in a televised format now and we're not going to be tomorrow evening. Anyone who wants to come in can submit comments. As it says on the website, you can also submit your comments directly to Mr. Withers, and the policy subcommittee will be working on final recommendations to the school committee next Monday night on March 2nd. Okay, so March 2nd, there'll be a policy subcommittee meeting, and it's our hope that the final recommendations will come out of that meeting. So I'll walk through the changes, and if anyone can interrupt me with questions, or if I get this wrong, which I'm reading it, so I really shouldn't, but if I do, let me know. And there's a rationale behind each component here, and certainly we want to make sure that we have adequately communicated that rationale to the community. So the first change is right now, all kindergarten students ride the bus for free. It doesn't matter where you live. If you're a kindergarten student, you ride the bus for free. And some of these are separable components of the proposed policy. So the committee would have the opportunity to essentially rework this such that not all provisions make it to the final cut. But again, I'll explain the rationale as to what got us to this point. Kindergarten right now rides for free. That does not change. This would expand that entitlement to first grade students. The rationale behind that is, as I said, we know that taking the bus to school is the safest means of transportation. We want to minimize the number of families who are detrimentally affected by this change. By detrimentally affected, I mean families that may be in a place where they can have service now, but will not be able to have service next year. We believe we've limited that impact to 0 families. If we know we've limited it to a minuscule number of families, and if it's the case that there's some unintended consequence, we believe the number is small enough where, particularly because in the end these routes will be developed sooner, we'll have more time for troubleshooting, we believe we'll be able to iron out those hiccups and actually have time to do it prior to the start of school, which will make school look very different at the beginning than it has in recent years. The next change is the actual enforcement of the walker zones. Right now, our walker zones essentially are walker zones unless you've signed up for fee-for-service, where most students who sign up for fee-for-service transportation ultimately receive service. Not 100%, but most people, even if you're in a walker zone, because we've tried to enforce the policy in a way where it gets as many students on the safest means of transportation possible. If you are in the walker zone, you still have a pretty good chance of getting a ride to school. The difference here is if you're in a walker zone, you'll be a walker, and unless there is either an educational purpose or a safety reason, you would not have a ride to school on the bus. However, what constitutes the walker zone, is this that compelling, or did everyone fall asleep? Okay, 'cause I'm not seeing a lot of nothing along. The walker zone has been contracted, okay? So again, with our goal of limiting the number of people that are detrimentally impacted, we contract the zones at each level, and so fewer families fall into the walker zone. If you still fall into the walker zone, and incidentally, right now, this doesn't change who is entitled to transportation service, because even though we get through most of the list, you're still, under the current policy, not guaranteed a ride. And so there is no change in that variable. Okay, and our next,
Excuse me.
yes, Mrs. Scales, thank you. I can find my place.
So, currently in our walker zone, how many walkers are there that actually walk?
All but 75. We have approximately 75 paid a fee to get on the bus and are taking the bus.
Out of
Is
how
that
many?
in our
Out of how-
zone?
So there are 75 students who live in a walker zone who paid to take the bus and who have now gotten on the bus.
Yes.
Although there are some who they didn't make it off the wait list. Not many, but we,
Yes.
okay. Any
Right.
idea the approximate number there?
Small, less than 15, probably less than 12.
And of the 75, sorry, so of the 75, just bear with me, that are now we're contracting the
Who
zone.
wants to talk about the mission statement?
Listen,
Anyone?
listen, so of the 75, they're now gonna be getting a bus anyways? Some of those will be getting a bus, correct?
Correct. Because they'll
Okay.
be in the first grade, there'll be safety issues, yes. correct.
Or because we've moved it in.
Or we moved it.
We did that.
School in the high
It
school.
was empty.
Lessened it.
Don't worry. Rarely there's any soda in the can in front of me, unfortunately. But-
Yes.
Okay, all right, go along.
Mr. Withers.
My question was answered. I was gonna say that 75 numbers with our current
Current.
walker
Currently.
Current walker,
distances,
right.
right, okay.
All right. Now, here we get to the big change. This is it. This is the big moment. This is the crux of the issue. If you're in the fee-for-service zone, right now, you sign up, you give us a check, and most people will get onto the bus. Okay? Could get onto the bus at any time between September and now, but eventually there'll be a seat for you. The problem with that is it has to do with when and how those routes are developed. And so, let me finish. By changing the fee-for-service zone such that you know when you sign up that you have to pay, but if you pay, you'll have a seat. It can provide for the certainty that we need to develop the routes. That means that the routes can be developed significantly earlier in the process, and one, give people that certainty so they know where to prepare to pick up the bus, but also it gives us the 2-month window we need before the first day of school to troubleshoot as many of the issues that come up in the development of those routes. Is that a fair characterization, Mr. Furtado? And feel free to elaborate.
That is, but just again, for the committee's benefit, the germination of the program, the theory was to provide access to open seats on your buses.
Right.
That bent over the years and became find a way to accommodate everybody who wants to ride the bus.
Because riding the bus is the safest
Because
way to
it's
get to
safe
school.
to say. So the philosophy of the program changed radically, and you're now accommodating everybody who wants a seat on the bus. So the change over to the new policy shouldn't be profound, because you're already providing ridership to everybody who wants it.
So essentially, we had a policy that was developed in the old days. The philosophy evolved, and it's our hope now that we can bring the policy up to speed with the philosophy
Practice.
that we want as many students on the bus as possible. And again, because we're already doing that, we don't anticipate a substantial budgetary impact. It just, what we expect is substantial clarity as to what people can expect and when they can get on the bus. Okay, so the one caveat in terms of how we define a detrimental impact to families on the other end of this policy is that under the current policy, we draw the line for middle school and high school at 1.5 miles from school to residence, okay? That 1.5 mile line of demarcation, okay, was the result of a state law that is no longer in effect. There was a time that there would be a reimbursement for students outside of 1.5 miles who were transported. That reimbursement no longer exists, okay? We could continue with the 1.5 arbitrary line of demarcation. However, at the elementary school level, we have it at 2 miles, and the idea behind this final provision of the policy change is to bring the middle school and high school level in line with the elementary school and keep it at 2 miles across the board. Now, so what is the detrimental impact? If you're a family who's between 1.5 miles and 2 miles, and you have ridden the bus for free, you would be subject to the $165 fee for service. That is a narrow band, but it is certainly an impact that families would be asked to absorb, subject to all the other limitations that come along with fee-for-service in terms of economic need, special education, or what have you, safety zones. There are exceptions all over the place, which is why when we looked at how many individual families would be in that band of going from free to paid, we're talking about a very small number of families. I don't mean to minimize the idea of going from free to paid, but there's not a significant number. And the question is, one, does the consistency across the board merit the consideration of that? And also, I think just sort of a recognition that, you know, the person who's 2.3 miles has always felt the same way that the person who's 1.7 miles. We're drawing an arbitrary line somewhere, and the idea is if it can provide for some clarity, and again, fee-for-service is not a revenue generator, but given the budgetary limitations that we're under, whatever amount that is, it will be extremely modest, will be put to good use in terms of keeping the transportation system moving in an efficient way. So those are the various components. Again, it's a very multi-dimensional change. At the end of the day, if someone doesn't feel like sitting through this discussion or coming to the public comment meeting or coming to the policy subcommittee meeting or coming to the special meeting after that, where this is discussed, and you just want to know what it is we're doing, we're changing a critical variable in the hope that the routes can be developed months earlier, so that way the system can run more efficiently, there can be more time to troubleshoot, and we can avoid a chaotic opening from a transportation standpoint. Mr. Storrs.
I just want to get clarification because your explanation threw me off a little bit. Am I right that the current policy for elementary, if you're outside of 1.5, it's free?
I may have, when I was saying that the middle school and high school change, I think it's actually the elementary school. I
Right,
apologize.
I think it was reversed. So I just want, so currently it's, if you're outside of 1.5, you're free.
At elementary.
Right, at elementary. For middle and high school, it's 2 miles. And
I did mix those up, I
okay.
apologize.
And what we're really changing is we're making it so elementary will now be 2. So effectively, the group that is really being negatively impacted by this, if you will, is the elementary that lives between 1.5 and 2.
That is correct.
And who are not in the first grade.
First grade, right.
And, or, right, who are not in the first grade. And those, right, yes, I agree with that. So do we know approximately how many second through fourth graders live between that 1.5 and 2?
I have gotten the raw data from Bloom. I have to still kind of work through it. I'll have that to the committee before tomorrow's meeting.
I thought we had a ballpark now.
We have the enrollment. We didn't have
Okay.
actual ridership, so I
Okay.
can give you ridership numbers now.
Okay, sounds good. And again, I would just say that there's no getting around the fact that people who, if you were free and now you're paid, that is a change. Again, you were free because of an arbitrary line that was drawn that has no impact in any other way other than an antiquated or a vestige of a law that's no longer in force. And we've tried to whatever degree there is a population there, which will not be included, I suspect, in Mr. Furtado's ridership numbers, because the ridership numbers, we'd have to slice off all of kindergarten, all of first grade, any special education issues, any safety issues, and is there another one?
Free and reduced lunch or something?
And economic issues. So once we take that total population out, the number gets even smaller,
Right.
and I think that's an important point. Mrs. Sawyer, did you have a question?
Well, I can see this affecting the residents of Ward 1 because we hardly have any sidewalks at all on the side streets where if the parents can't afford to pay the $165, the elementary students are forced to walk. And, you know, as of today, the west side of Washington Street has never been plowed for the students that are forced to walk to school.
Okay, again,
And 4 of which are the 4 students I gave to Superintendent Sheehan, who the 4 parents wanted to be reviewed as safety issues, which never got put on the bus.
okay, again, when another item that this policy calls for is exceptions based on safety that would obligate the superintendent to consult with the Attleboro Police Department so that a determination can be made. If it's a situation where there are no sidewalks, then it would seem to me that the recommendation is that that is a safety zone exception. I am not a member of the Attleboro Police. I don't know the specific block that we're talking about right now, but if there's a concern with regard to that, then that should be brought to the superintendent's attention, and I'm sure he will confer with the public safety officials, which is the policy now and would be the policy here. This will not change that in any way whatsoever. Mr. Withers, I'm sorry.
I've already emailed them twice, and it
Okay.
has yet to be taken care of.
Well, we could certainly touch upon that
He
issue.
had been, he had been
Again,
CC'd
this
on
is,
the email.
right now, we're talking about
Okay.
potential policy revision, not the plowing of a particular sidewalk. But
Okay.
I understand the concern, and certainly I will follow up with the superintendent. Mr. Withers?
Yeah, follow up on what you said, Chairman Murphy. I mean, you're talking about in Ward 1, I mean, the impact would be on second to fourth graders between 1.5 and 2 miles, like everywhere else. And so you have a smaller group of people, plus also the safety concerns, as we just discussed. And also, you mentioned affordability with the fee-for-service program. If you're on free or reduced lunch, you're not paying the fee. So it's not, you know, it's obviously going to make an impact on anyone that has to pay it that wasn't paying it before. But for those families that can't pay it, there is mechanisms in place to provide for that.
And I think, again, given the fact that there will be an additional 2-month window in which we can troubleshoot, it very well might be the case where more time is available to devote to those types of discrete concerns, where individuals or individual families are able to make a compelling case. Again, I don't care what the time window is. If there's a safety concern, it needs to be addressed. It needs to be addressed promptly. But there may be other extenuating circumstances under which the superintendent may waive the fee. Again, I think that it's important to provide that flexibility. There will be a difference in terms of the waiving of the provisions with regard to the walker zones. That is critical to this change because we're trying to provide the certainty that's necessary for the routes. But here, I believe we've whittled the number of families who are affected in that sense down to a handful, if any. And again, I suspect there are none, but I don't want to make that promise. Mr. Storrs?
I think it's very appropriate that we're having a hearing to allow those who may be negatively impacted by this to pass that to the committee. I would hope, of course, that through these meetings, the population that we're talking about would be aware, but assuming that not every single person is actually watching these meetings, what mechanism has been used to make sure that those, or everybody for all that matter, but at a minimum, those being impacted by this are aware of that hearing tomorrow?
We've communicated it through local media, asked for articles to be written. They were. We've communicated through social media. We've posted on the district website, and we can certainly ask the building principals to put reminders of that nature out. But, I mean, I want to make very clear, the number of people that were detrimentally affected the way we've done this in the past, we can't fit in this room. So if we want to have a public hearing for people that were affected at the beginning of this school year, we're going to have to, I guess, move across the hall, and Mr. Tarsi's going to show in there. So we're not going to. There's no room for us right now. But I don't think anyone suggests that this proposal is going to solve all our problems, or we're going to open it, in pitch perfect on the first day of school. But I don't know that this is perfect. In fact, I know that it's not. I do know that what has occurred over the last several years is unacceptable, and a change has to be made. And if we're going to wait till we fine-tune the change where there's absolutely no negative impact on anyone, I think we're going to end up in the same place that we were in, and that would be my concern. Mr. Stowe.
Okay, I wasn't sure if this question should be directed to you or him, but how exactly are the Walker and the FIFA zones determined?
The lines of demarcation for the zones. At one time, the 1.5 miles, which is sort of at the heart of the current policy, was because the state government would reimburse local school districts for the number of students that they transported outside of 1.5 miles. How did the state determine that? I think the way the state normally determines it is they pick a number out of a hat and then they mandate it across to local communities. So that is, at some point, that happened. Is that a fair?
It's a radius around the school. It's not by road.
Okay, thank you.
So that's, but a good question and an appropriate one. Mr. Tyler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman Murphy. I think we can't deny that we're going to have some affected constituents. It's going to happen. But the bigger picture is both of my children are affected by it. I fall into that little percentile. But we have to look at the bigger picture here. These school openings have been atrocious, not because of the preparation done in the classrooms to get them ready, but because of transportation. So if 5% of the constituents are affected, I'm sorry, but we're looking after the other 95% that know from day one that they're going to have busted for their child. There's no scrambling around at the last minute. There's no letters in the mail saying you have it, you don't have it, you have it. There's no, you paid $75, so you think you're entitled to it, and then you don't. So we're trying to, it's not going to be perfect, I don't think, but this school committee gave a directive to the administration to fix an ongoing problem, and this is the first conceptual plan to do so. So are some people going to be affected? Absolutely. We have to be able to look them straight in the eye and say, we did the best we could to minimize the impact, but we have a whole district to look forward to. We can't be just looking after a couple of select individuals. That's not what we serve. So.
Thank you, Mr. Tyler. And I said, I think very affirmative efforts have been made to minimize those who are affected, and so I don't want to overstate that it is conceivable that we are talking about a handful of people. Apparently, one of them happens to be here. But that's. But yeah, so I hope that the impact is minimized. And again, this is not the only change we're making. Mr. Furtado has instituted a series of other administrative changes that I think have been helpful. I think we're better prepared. But I think as a district, we learned some very tough lessons in the opening weeks of school, and there were situations and circumstances that families should not have to put up with. It was completely unacceptable, and we're going to continue to try to make efforts to make sure that doesn't happen again, and that we don't want to. Our goal is not to get back to the fall of 2013 standard. That wasn't exactly the gold standard either. I mean, we've got. This has been an issue that the district's been grappling with for some time, and hopefully we're going to try to make some progress on it. Mr. Storrs?
I totally agree. The issues we had at the beginning of this year, never should have had them. We do need to make changes to fix those, no doubt. So I do think creating a system where it's known beforehand, like you've been speaking to, is absolutely the right thing to do. The only thing I'm not fully aware of, maybe it's because I don't have the numbers yet and understand that, is how making that one change, the 1.5 to 2, how that actually will impact fixing those things.
Yeah, I would certainly acknowledge that it is the least. It's probably the least important provision in terms of fixing the underlying problems, okay? But it is also a completely arbitrary number that does lead to confusion. I would say that there's some value in when we are fixing the other weightier problems, the things that are really weighing down this program, taking the arbitrariness out of the policy to the degree that we can. I think now's the time to do it. I think one of the issues that all school committees deal with, and this committee has in this community, is that once an issue is addressed, if there's a sign of progress, nobody wants to touch it again. And I think, it's years later when another debacle occurs, that's when the issue comes up again. And so I wouldn't want us to, because there is some difficulty to it, just sort of to ignore that, or not let the pitch go by, I guess is a way I would phrase it. Mr. Withers sounds like he's got a final comment for the evening, since he will be presiding over the.
This is just practice. So. Yeah, I think another point on that, on the moving from the 1.5 to the 2 miles, and Chairman Murphy, I agree with what you're saying in that we're amending the policy now, so we might as well amend the whole policy, even if it's, this one item doesn't make as much of a difference. But one thing we've talked about in the past, and we talked about in coming up with a way to amend this policy, is that it's a relatively minor amount of money, but it is, we do receive some money for this service that we provide. And as we've seen this past year, especially, negotiations can get very delicate over, where that money's coming from, how are we using the money. And I think there was an understanding on the part of those of us who discussed this at the policy level and the administration when they put it together, that we have to be mindful of that. And we are providing some additional free service to first graders and some other instances. So, this, is a way to acknowledge that and, acknowledge that we're going to be strong stewards of the money.
That's an outstanding point, a great point to finish the conversation. And again, we have one concern that we have not heard a lot of is the actual amount that's charged. That the $165, certainly could. There are communities that pay a lot more and impose much heavier fines. And I think that given the transportation budget challenges that we've had in other years, it might be very appropriate for the committee to consider possibly raising those fees. That is not part of this policy. Personally, given the changes that we're currently contemplating, I would be hesitant to support increases in the fees right now. They have to go up eventually, but not doing them this year is another way in which I think we are lessening the impact to the greatest extent possible, but also bring in whatever revenue we can in order to properly invest it in the transportation system, and this is another opportunity to do that. So we minimize the impact on individual families and acknowledge that the burden is spread out in a way that we hope is appropriate and fair. I kind of made a contradictory point by accident there, but I do completely agree with what you're saying. All right. Well, I think that pretty much does it for tonight. We have lots of meetings coming up. The public hearing on fee for service.
One last question.
Sure.
When we get the figures of the actual number of affected children, is it going to be shared amongst the whole committee?
Yes.
Thank you.
The public hearing will be tomorrow, February 25th, 6:45 p.m. The Mission Vision subgroup will be meeting on the 25th, that's Wednesday the 25th, to discuss the public feedback that's come in from the draft mission statement and essential beliefs. Public engagement subgroup, which we'll be hearing from in the coming weeks, will meet on Thursday, February 26th. Policy subcommittee will meet to formulate final recommendations with regard to the proposed revisions to policy EEA governing fee-for-service on Monday, March 2nd. Curriculum instruction subcommittee is going to get together on March 4th. We will meet in this room 2 weeks from tonight on Monday, March 9th, and the finance and budget committee will meet on Tuesday, March 10th. There are the potential for special meetings involving both transportation services There's some infrastructure issues that we need to deal with, and it's possible we may group that with the final adoption of changes to EEA, if there are any, and also a potential special meeting I'm hoping by the middle of March with regard to strategic planning, where the final presentation or recommendation can be made with regard to essential beliefs and the district's new mission statement. So that's a look at the upcoming month on Planet School Committee, and we will certainly look forward to. Mr. Furtado has a final comment.
Chairman, before you
It's going to be hard to
adjourn,
top Mr. Withers. This was pretty good.
I would not even attempt it. We had a meeting with the city today, and the city auditor had asked that we pass these documents out to the school committee members. This is a notification of the FY14 Medicaid funds that haven't yet been distributed to the school department. So some good news from a budgetary perspective.
Great. Always good to end on a high note. All right. Motion to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Good night.